How you doing, Bruin fans? Todd Reeves here with your UCLA Daily Report, part of the Fan Arch Network. Glad you joined me today on this Wednesday, talking UCLA hoops. Yesterday we talked about the UConn loss this past Sunday. Did a little bit of a deep dive on what went wrong in that game and some of the factors that led to the loss. So, if you want to check that out and see what I had to say about that Connecticut game and the bitter defeat by 16. You can go back to yesterday's show and listen to that. But glad you've joined me today. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And of course, if you have any comments, which I hope you do on this subject, leave them down below. So we're going to be talking Mick Cronin and the future of him and the UCLA men's basketball program. So when you talk about Mick Cronin, Martin Jarman, the AD, has a difficult decision to make. Mick Cronin is, you'd have to say, on the hot seat. Now, there's no reports that his firing's imminent. I don't even think he's one of the coaches on the hottest seat. That's got to be the guy in North Carolina, Hubert Davis. You know, might be fired or might be given the old vote of confidence here in the next day or two. But nothing has come out. There's no like inside reports that I've seen or anyone reporting that, oh, Mick Cronin's in big trouble. And he may or he may not be. We don't know. But it's definitely a decision that has to be made. And, when you look back on this season, it was really an up and down season for Mick Cronin. I mean, let's even go back to last summer in the recruiting. It was a big thumbs up in recruiting, thumbs up in recruiting for getting Donovan Dent. That was a huge get for UCLA. I mean, he was supposed to be one of the best, if not the best, point guard in the country this season. He obviously did not turn out that way, but in the recruiting circles, that was a huge get. So that was a big plus on the plus side. He also got Xavier Booker, who was going to fill that five spot or that center spot because of the big negative, which was losing a Mara to the Michigan Wolverines, and we all know how that turned out for them and for Mara, who is one of the cornerstones of that team that has a chance at winning a national championship. And so that was kind of a bitter loss. I know there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff with Mara that went maybe haywire, or there were some factors that we don't know about that led to his departure. And but still, it was a definitely a negative as far as that goes. And also on the recruiting side, there was really no freshmen that stepped up. We got some small transfers, or I should say small, but transfers from small schools like Jamar Brown from Missouri, Kansas City, and Steve Jamerson from University of San Diego, where he was coached by ex-UCLA coach Steve Lavin. So those two, but they didn't contribute that much this year. I think Brown contributed a little bit more in the first half of the season than the second half. So as far as recruiting, it was even up and down then. None of the guys that he brought in this year really made a huge impact. I mean, Booker was, pretty solid, and Brown, got some minutes off the bench. And Jamerson really, was a guy they brought in, to back up Booker. But, as the season went on, he played less and less. So, I mean, it was up and down for Cronin. And then the season started, and it was an all right non-conference season. They beat everybody they should have beaten. All the cupcakes on the schedule they took care of, but they didn't get either of their two big victories against Arizona in a tight loss at the Intuit Dome, or the Clipper Dome, as I like to call it. And they also lost up in Seattle by 10 to Gonzaga. Two good teams, and they played well in those games. There was no shame in those, but those losses didn't help. And so, UCLA was kind of behind the eight ball going into the Big Ten conference play. And they kind of started off not so great in conference play either, but they righted the ship. And, after really hitting a low point at Michigan State, really picked it up at the end of the year and was able to get a sixth seed. However, you look back, I'm sure UCLA in most preseason magazines, or most people that do these predictions, had them in the probably top four, fifth place at worst. Uh, Most of them, if not all of them, had UCLA preseason top 25, including one. I saw one prognosticator had them fourth in the country, fourth preseason. This was back in summer. So there was high expectations, and the Bruins didn't meet those high expectations. So, I mean, Now the question becomes, this is Cronin's seventh year. He's just completed it. The last 3 years, he's missed the tournament. He's been a 7 seed out in the second round, and he's been a 7 seed out in the second round. His winning percentage is 681 at UCLA, which would rank ninth in Bruin history as far as the list of coaches. He's just behind Ben Howland. He is ahead of Steve Lavin and Steve Alford, though, the two Steves. So he's, it's not great, but he still has maybe some years to pick it up, which is also interesting. 681 winning percentage at UCLA is his exact winning percentage for his career. So he's won everywhere he's been, where it'd be Murray State, Cincinnati, where he made, I believe, 9 tournaments in a row. And he's made the tournament every year at UCLA, except for that one I just mentioned. And the other one he didn't go to the tournament was his first year, but that was the COVID year when the tournament was canceled. So, uh, Cronin had a good finish to this season. I mean, taking away the UConn loss, of course, but I mean, they had a very successful Big Ten tournament, results wise, injury wise, not so much. And that was the other thing that UCLA had to deal with. And Cronin was the injury. Sky Clark missing a good chunk of the year with that hamstring injury, and then later in the year, Bilodeau not even being able to play in the NCAA tournament was a big blow, and one of the major reasons why the Bruins are no longer playing this season. So it was an up and down kind of year for Cronin. But I'm sure there's some fans out there that say, absolutely, we shouldn't even be talking about this. We need to keep Cronin for another year. And I can see what they're saying. And so I'm going to make the case for Mick Cronin and why they should keep him. I mean, first of all, like I said, he wins wherever he goes. I mean, he'd be like a Mike Tomlin, who just got fired in Pittsburgh for the Steelers a few months ago, or excuse me, I think they mutually parted ways, or he quit. But either way, um, they got rid of him. He's no longer the coach, and any team with an opening would want to hire Tomlin. And I think that's the same thing with Mick Cronin. I mean, maybe not like if Duke or someone came open, but any decent school, even a top 20 program, would definitely look at Mick Cronin if UCLA let him go. I mean, the guy wins. He can coach. There's no doubt about it. But can he coach UCLA to the highest level? I mean, he's gotten them to the Final Four, so that's a big check mark on his resume. Now, we'll talk about the circumstances that led to the Final Four, but the fact is he got there, and it took a miracle shot from Gonzaga's Suggs, who hit a half court shot to knock him out. So, I mean, he's developed some pros. He developed Jaime Jaquez, who's been a nice pro in the league. He's I'm sure Donovan Dent, Tyler Bilodeau will be in the league. There was Watson, the freshman who is now is playing really well for the Denver Nuggets. Peyton Watson, excuse me, now playing really well for the Nuggets. So the he's developed some pros. He's gotten some good recruits in the past. Amari Bailey, Dembona. He's had some good recruiting classes. So I think you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. 2 years ago when he brought in all those foreign players, turned out to be a disaster. That team was atrocious, and he's improved the roster since then. And again, it's not like the Bruins have fallen, on their face where they're like 500 and are in the bottom or near the bottom of the Big Ten conference. No, he has them up there, and we'll see what the road has, as far as it goes. If they decide to keep him, which again, there's no indications that firing is imminent, but 7 years is a long time to be at a school, especially one like UCLA, and only have one Final Four. And that was his second year in the program. And since then, he's been to the Sweet 16 twice with some great teams. Uh, but, and he's also had some unfortunate circumstances, Bona being hurt that one year. I believe that was the year they lost to Gonzaga again on the deep three pointer near the buzzer. So, he had the North Carolina loss in the tournament when, it was an 8 seeded, but a red hot North Carolina team. I mean, it was just an unfortunate bracket that they got put into. So, there's always those excuses or reasons. I don't necessarily say excuses, but reasons why UCLA hasn't gone farther in the tournament. But the bottom line is, do you believe Cronin can get them to another Final Four and possibly a championship? I think you have to say yes. He's done it once already, and you know who knows. Now again, I'm just playing the character. I'm not saying personally he's going to get him to a championship, but I think you have to make the argument that he absolutely can if he gets the right team to coach. So there's some positives when it comes to Mick Cronin and some good reasons. Again, you're going to probably look at 20 to 25 wins next year. But the thing is like, is that good enough? And a lot of people, I think, would say no. I think they expected Cronin to, be a perennial power by this time, by his seventh year. Not necessarily have a championship necessarily. I mean, he does have the one Final Four, but as I always say, it was a COVID year. It was a special year. They were in a hotel in Indianapolis. They played in Indianapolis the whole tournament, and so there was kind of a fluke. They were an 11 seed in the playing game. They were down in that playing game, I think by double digits. The Michigan State came back and won, and then went on that magical run to the Final Four. But again, it was an 11 seed that barely got in the tournament. So, I mean, it's really those 5 games or so, like those are the 5 games in 7 years that would save his job. I mean, possibly, but the thing is that Mick Cronin in his 7 years, there's only been 2 years when UCLA's been ranked in the top 25 at the end of the year in the final AP poll. 2 times out of 7 that UCLA's been ranked in the top 25. I mean, is that good enough? I think most UCLA basketball fans say absolutely not. I mean, we need to be up there with the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Connecticut's and the Houstons. And so far, we're a notch or two below those teams because at least right now, because we keep getting 7 seeds and we run into 2 seeds and we lose by double digits. So that's not a lot of Bruin fans say that's not good enough. That needs to be better. And the other thing too is the recruiting. The recruiting hasn't been good enough. As we mentioned earlier, you had the foreign players a couple years ago that brought him in and did not work out. He's used his NIL money for players like Eric Daly, who has been okay. He's been all right, but he hasn't been anything spectacular or great. Sky Clark's been pretty good, but not all American type. Tyler Bilodeau was a nice pickup, but wasn't really the type of Mick Cronin player he usually has. Bilodeau was a scorer and not a good rebounder, not a great defender, and that's not usually what Mick Cronin does. And then the high school recruiting. I mean, Eric Freeney was, eh, he was their big recruit 2 years ago, and last year he redshirted. We thought because of the team was really deep and just Freeney couldn't break into the lineup and get any time. But this year he was pretty disappointing. He's a very much a role player. He's not a star. I mean, I don't even know if he'll be a starter in his UCLA career. I'm not sure. He'd have to improve an awful lot to do that. So the recruiting's been a little bit down. The NIL spending's been a little bit off. Donovan Dent, I mean, you got to give him credit for getting him, but Donovan Dent turned out to be not so great. Now, maybe if he had him next year, he would improve a lot, but that's not the case. So, and then Trent Perry, of course, another big recruit a couple of years ago. He's turned out to be all right. And, there's nothing wrong with Trent Perry at all. I think they did a good job in that, but he's just missed in other areas. Like we said, Jamar Brown, Steve Jamerson contributed almost nothing this year. Those were, players that maybe we thought could contribute and be nice role players, nice additions off the bench. It didn't turn out to be that way. And Brandon Williams is in his 3rd year in the program, and he's still kind of a raw role player. So, and the recruiting's been okay lately. They got 2 guys coming in. They just got a 4-star forward who was, I think, ranked the 53rd player in the country. So, the recruiting is okay, but he's going to have to be in the transfer portal big time and get overhaul this team. And that's the other thing. If you're going to overhaul this team, like how many guys are staying, how many guys are going, this might be the time to get rid of them. But the bottom line is they probably won't. And let's also address the elephant in the room. The reason they probably won't is because of the buyout. I mean, right now, if they waited till April 1st to fire Mick Cronin, the buyout would be $18 million. That's a lot of money. And then every year after this, it goes down $4.5 million. So next year, if they fire him after next year, it'll be 13.5 million. and after that it'd be 9 million. So how much do you wait? How much can you afford to pay out his contract? And that's always a big factor when it comes to UCLA is the money situation. So we'll see what happens, and we'll talk about this more. Hopefully, we have we have some definite word coming out from the athletic department. Whether yes, he's going to be the coach, no doubt, or maybe we're going to go in a different direction. So let's finish things up with a little bit of football. Before we close things out, UCLA football announced their spring game will be May 2nd. That was no surprise. But yesterday, they also announced that it will be at the Rose Bowl. We wondered where it was going to be, where Rose Bowl or Drake. It will be at the Rose Bowl. The gates open up at 9 o'clock. The parking, I should say, should open up at 9 o'clock. The gates to get in the stadium will open up at 10, and the game is at noon. Now they're calling it a game. What will it be? Will it be a glorified practice? Will it just be, glorified warm-ups, or will it be an actual game, or how will they do it? We don't know. That we don't know. But tickets are free, Bruin fans. You just have to go onto the UCLA website and you have to reserve your tickets. They don't cost a cent. I don't know about parking. They haven't said anything about parking, but at least getting into the stadium and getting in and watching the Bob Chesney and those guys go around and fly around and play some football. I mean, it's a great deal. So May 2nd at noon. It'll be interesting to see how Bob Chesney works that spring game. And again, go on UCLA's website, their football website. It'll be on there, and you can go to the spring game for free. You just got to reserve some tickets. So that'll be it for today on this Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow on Thursday, and we'll talk more UCLA sports then. All right, take care, everybody. Have a good one, Bruin fans.